So, well, why did we create this? And there's actually a kind of a simple answer. I wanted to play that. Okay, I'm in my late 40s, but growing up, when I saw that movie, I'm a Star Wars kid, but I'm also a Star Trek kid. I loved both. There's no reason you can't love both. But when I saw that particular film, my love of the concept of starships started with that movie. And everybody knows what that is, right? Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. You know, Khan, that kind of thing. And by the way, I'm up here talking, and I'm kind of talking through our history and some of the things we're going to. I want this to be interactive. I didn't say that up front. If you've got a question or curiosity, please interrupt and raise your hand. Feel free to. While we've got about 20 some odd slides I'm going to go through, raise your hand if you've got questions, and hopefully we'll leave time at the end for plenty of Q&A. So just FYI. And then go ahead there. And of course, you know, not only the bridge concept, but just the whole idea where you can play head-to-head against either, you know, an NPC or another entire bridge of humans, right? Live people that you're playing against, and you're trying to outwit them and outsmart them. It's not just slugfest, right? You're trying to be tactical in how you're working through this. So that was a huge inspiration for what started us on this path. Now, what I'm going to walk you through is some of the inspirations that were my inspirations in video games. We are at MAGFest after all, so I want to kind of show you what inspired how we went about designing Starship Horizons. Okay?
Uh-oh.
Oh, actually, no, you're good. No,
Did I break it?
No, you're fine. You're fine. We can go back to that. I actually have a video I'll show you when we have time. No, you can go forward. It's okay. Go forward 2 more. Yeah. So, and again, let's talk about what inspired us, okay? So, as I told you, in the 80s, I was a programmer, but I started my programming career, by the way, on punch cards. So I'm not dating myself at all by saying that. I know this. Wrote my first Hello World program literally on punch cards, learned the techniques that you have to do. You have to mark the sides to make sure if you spilled them, you know how to put them back together easily, all those little things. But MTREC is something that started in the 80s. Has anybody ever heard of MTREC? Okay, one hand. Actually, that's more than I expected, honestly. This was a Telnet game that you played in dial-up with your phone, and usually it was run through universities back in the day. You can actually play this today. It's run in a Telnet client, all text, but it would run real time, and you could dial in with other friends and play live in the 80s, real time in a 3D space and navigate, and it was a Star Trek universe. So you could go to Romulus, you could go to Vulcan, you could battle with other ships in a full 3D environment, and you can see the XYZ and everything there. So I was playing this a little too much. Back then you actually had to pay for your phone usage. It wasn't unlimited. So I racked up a few bills back in the for that back in the day. But what's amazing is they've adapted this to what they call, you can go to mtrek.com and it'll take you there. You can play this today as JTREC. It's a Java-based version where they've enhanced it a little bit and added a few more simplicities to the way to play it. But a great little game, and this was the beginning for me as a programmer of saying, well, what if I took this? What could I do to make it even cooler? So, next one. And I'm a big simulations fan overall. Who's played X-Wing in any fashion, right? Some of them haven't stood the test of time graphically, but some of the later ones like X-Wing Alliance still are extremely playable, and you can get them on Steam and good old games. But as a simulation, of course, it was Star Wars. It was a beautifully done game for that universe. This game influenced Horizons in a lot of ways relative to its mission design. With Horizons, we wanted to have the idea of you had primary objectives, secondary objectives, optional objectives, tertiary, where there was a lot of things that could go right or wrong during your mission play. That's something that we try to focus on with the missions we've been building with Horizons. What you have not seen if you've played before is you haven't seen anything that we've done with campaigns yet. That's going to be one of the last things we do with the version 1 of the product as we get later into 2018. But we want to do the same kind of thing, and I'm going to talk about campaigns a little bit later on. And of course, the gameplay itself, the actual simulation controls with a good old flight stick were amazing in that game. Okay. And a game that it's compared to, it was a contemporary of it, was Wing Commander. Again, show of hands, who played that back in the day? Stop, you're going to raise your hand at every one of these, just stop. It had a lot of similarities with Syntax. It was much more of an arcade action simulation, but it was great. Again, that campaign was amazing, and responsive controls. Okay. Now, Star Control 2. Okay. Again, come on, anybody else? No? Okay, a few hands in the back. This actually, a few years ago, was taken by a developer, and this is in the open, the public domain. They actually took the 3DO version of this that had full audio, full speech, and compiled it. You can download it for free and play this game today. And what is amazing about Star Control 2 that if you play Horizons and you go look at the universe map, there's definitely some influences here where you had an entire thousands of star systems to explore in a game that was made in the early 90s, where you actually had to go to each star system, go to each planet, inspect the planet, find out what minerals and resources it had, and really take your time exploring this vast universe. And it took a long time. It was great. And again, if you have any curiosities about this, I strongly recommend you give it a try. It's SC2 at sourceforge.net. It's so great. Okay, thank you. And here's one that has nothing to do with space. Who's played any of the Ultima series? Okay. The thing about that really informed us with the Ultima series is it was even in the early games, especially everybody points to Ultima 4, was a major influence on the fact that characters had daily cycles, right? They would get up and go do something. They had a process. It was kind of this living, breathing world. And especially when they got to Ultima 7, you could go out and get all the ingredients and then go make bread. I mean, that, and again, at the time, that was revolutionary. Of course, we've been long past that, being 20 years past this, 25 years actually. But what I'm going to talk about more with Horizons is really about that living world. Okay. So, in building a game like Starship Horizons that is built around, essentially 6 people playing, right? What's really the biggest challenge you have? Okay. Well, if you've got 6 players, the biggest challenge is you got to make sure they have something to do, right? If you're in a tactical assignment, what's your communications officer doing? If you're in a situation where the comms officer is doing a lot of detente and talking back and forth with NPCs, well, your tactical officer sitting there twiddling their thumbs. Maybe it's a science mission, right, where you're doing a lot of scanning, same thing. So the biggest challenge is getting everybody involved. Okay. Yeah. So how do you give everybody something to do? Well, there's another game that does a pretty good job of this. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. So, even with, what's the truth, right? It's a social game, right? It's a game, but you're there with your friends, and you're not necessarily doing something 100% of the time. But if we're doing our job as a game developer and giving you something to do, it's really about immersing you in that world and letting you have fun with your friends. And if you happen to be sitting there idle for 10, 20, 30 seconds, it's not a big deal. It's no different than Dungeons and Dragons, right? How many people wait for your turn to roll the dice? You're there having a good time with friends. So if any of you've talked to me, as we evolve Horizons and get to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about with our future, the thing about Horizons is we're really approaching it design-wise as what if people were getting together every Friday night, somebody brings the pizza, somebody brings the beer, and you play 6 hours of the campaign just like you would D&D. That's where we're going with this. We want you to be able to have that kind of fun where you get your group together constantly. And you hear me say get them together constantly. You can do this online, of course, too. You will always hear me always encourage you to do the D&D style where you get together as a group in one place. But, okay, go ahead. But like I said, it's a social game. So we're trying to understand that we're trying to give everybody something to do, but we want to understand that we want everybody to have a great time. Okay. So what's on the horizon? Yes, bad pun intended. So again, most of you have played. We do have fighters in the game today, but I'm going to tell you a lot of things we have coming. So with fighters, and you can go ahead to the next slide, is we're going to really take the fighter support to the next level. With multiplayer, which we already have multi-bridge today, but I want you to think kind of like in a Battlestar Galactica way. Imagine playing with your friends where you have a crew that's playing the carrier ship, right? Playing the big carrier ship. But what if you had other friends that were on that ship as fighters, where your communications officer said, okay, all fighters launch, and then your friends playing the fighters launch from the same vessel and go out, and you're all in the same immersive experience, some as fighters, some as a bridge crew, and you can mix and match, right? So that's a big thing we've got coming, and fighter-specific missions will be part of that. Fighters are already in the game today, but they really aren't supported the way we want to see that. So that's something that I think is going to really, especially for the online community, if you've got a group of friends that you're playing together at one house, so you're all physically together, but you have other friends that want to play as fighters, you just connect up online and you play that way. So again, that's kind of that Battlestar Galactica kind of influence with what we're doing. And both for NPCs and for player characters, if you want, we're going to actually support formations so that the fighter groups can actually form up, and even players can form up. You do missing man formation and some of the other things tactically as well. So you can do different tactical formations based on the need. And of course, more weapons, sonic weapons, pulse weapons, get more variety into what we were doing with Horizons. And the big one at the bottom, cloaking. Cloaking has actually been secretly available in Horizons for almost 3 years, but we've never unveiled it, and that's shame on me. But imagine playing bridge versus bridge, and one of you has cloaking, like in the Star Trek reference, like a Romulan bird of prey, right? And it gets really interesting, doesn't it? So that's that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. So if you play Horizons at MAGFest this year, you'll notice that science has gotten a little bit of a kick, and this is just the beginning. With sciences today, so again, if you play now, you'll actually see the exact same screen we have here. You can actually now scan the planet, you'll see the entire layout, and you'll see it in a grid fashion. You can touch on an area, get the latitude and longitude of what you're scanning, and it'll actually focus in on the area you've touched. We're going to be enhancing this so that, again, this is that Star Control 2 influence kind of coming into play, where you'll actually be able to do searches for minerals. If there's a base on the planet or defenses, you'll be able to see that. And you can go ahead and kick to the next slide. So a ton of more planetary detail. Scan for biologics, elements, and energy readings on the surface. So if you're doing a snatch and grab mission or trying to find a particular resource, this could be a multi-bridge one too, where you're both trying to find a particular resource first, and it requires that kind of level of scanning. You'll have that. But also sending shuttles and other support ships down, ships down to the surface. For some reason, it reads like shop from here. I was like, why does it say that? So imagine interacting with the surface of a planet, not just scanning it, right? So you can have bases and other things on the planet that you can interact with just like you would in space. And then attack and defend against planetary defenses. So, whether it's, the Star Wars reference with the Hoth ion cannon or something like that, or the Grand Canyon from Robotech, or Macross, depending on your lineage, things like that. That's going to really change a lot of the dynamics and how we do some of our future missions, because that's a level that I've been wanting for a long time. I'm really looking forward to that. Okay. And expanded missions. Our mission detail is actually pretty amazing right now. What we really know we're lacking is content in the game. More ships, more things to do with those ships, more types of weapons, which I mentioned earlier, but also more missions. And we're going to be expanding that so you can actually, and this is again for the community as well as what we're doing, linked missions. So that based on the results of one, you can immediately take the players into the next mission with no break in the game. So there's no, load, stop, reload. You can immediately fork them into a particular mission based on their result. So think of it like a tree, and you could create your own campaigns this way. So that based on that mission, okay, they succeeded here, but they didn't quite get what we wanted done, so now this happens. And as a result, there's some other things we're going to talk about, well, that will carry on as you go through these different missions. And again, that gets into that whole campaign setting that we talked about. Even more event triggers and actions that we're adding. We've added about 20 since last MAGFest to this MAGFest. And we're unveiling a new mission later tomorrow, that enhances some of the things that we've done. So right now you haven't seen some of the stuff we're working on, but we're really excited about that. And the last one is something that a lot of people have asked for, especially the homebrew community that wants to create their own content, but they're not necessarily a developer, right? Coming in the game in a not very distant future is a mission editor UI built into the experience. So you'll actually be able to create your own missions right from the Horizons console. Without needing to know any programming whatsoever. And that includes completely scripting any of the events and triggers and actions. All that will be built into the UI, so you can manage all of that without having to know any lick of coding, whether it's XML, HTML, or even JavaScript. Okay? So this gets us to something I talked about before, a living, breathing universe. And that's that ultimate reference I talked about before. These are a lot of things that we've had on the drawing board, things we've been working towards, and we've had the simulator here at MAGFest for almost, I think this is our 4th year now. And we started the project just before that. Jim LeMaster and I actually demoed it at a maker fair with another friend of ours, a little over 4 years ago at this point. 4.5. Yeah, what's crazy about that, and actually I'm going to ask a different question. Any developers in the room? Oh, that's awesome. So here's why I'm bringing this up is, yeah, but here's why I'm bringing this up that I really encourage you to do is, I've seen so many developers, and I'm guilty of this too, where you have this great idea and you start working on it, right? But you don't want to show it to anybody or get it out there for people to see it until it's completely what you want. The lesson that the Horizons has taught me, and I've done a lot of projects over the years, is this one. I came up with the idea, and I'm from Newport News, Virginia, by the way. I don't know if there's anybody from down that region, but I was at a friend's hackerspace. It was called 757 Labs, and I was sitting on the couch, and I said, you know what? And I'm going to give credit, by the way. There's another game called Artemis that is also a bridge simulator. I found out about it. I had started, and I didn't include a slide on this, and I should have. I started my own bridge simulator in the late 90s, trying to kind of bring back MTrek in a different way, because I was such a fan of that. And I put it on the shelf because the technology wasn't there. Then flash forward to about 4.5 years ago, I found out about Artemis, just like everybody else. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. Somebody actually did it. I need to get off my ass. So what Artemis did, it was encourage me to bring back my idea and say, okay, let's just get this done. That was in early September of that year. So I think that's 2013? Wow.
It's actually like 5.5 years ago.
Yeah, so 2012 then. It was 2012. So early September, there was a maker fair in late October. It was like the third week of October. I started the project early September. We took it to the maker fair 7 weeks. It was almost 8 weeks later. And it was nothing like what you've played even in the last few years, but it was a basic concept that had flight and tactical, and it worked. It wasn't amazing, but what we wanted to do is, okay, I've got this cool idea in terms of how we're going to do this and how we want to implement this. Are people going to like it? I didn't wait to finish everything until I got there. I said, let's put it out there. It's a maker fair. If people hate it, no big deal. So really, my long-winded comment is, if you've got a cool idea, put something together, get it out there, right? There's no harm in that. Don't wait until you have this perfect idea, because what's going to happen is, and this has happened to me, you get to the end of that line and you're so proud of what you've done, and then you realize, well, it's not what people were hoping I was doing, or they didn't really get what I was after, and you kind of put all that effort into it. So, sorry, long-winded sidetrack, but I thought relevant. But relative to back to the living, breathing universe, the NPCs are really going to be growing very rapidly in our development over the next 6 months. So those of you that have already have copies of this in the early access, you're going to see this really soon. Where the captains, and I'm talking about the NPC captains, have both a stance that they have towards you as an individual, meaning you, the captain, you, the ship, but they also have a general disposition. You know, are they a surly old captain? Are they a cautious captain? And none of this is necessarily new to game design, but the point here is, if you take those two elements and combine them, you get a very unique experience with how those captains react to you tactically. And then, just like Ultima, NPCs will have schedules. Again, there's plenty of other games that do this similarly, but we're going to be bringing this to Horizons, where those NPCs are going to be doing their own thing, making their own decisions and their own choices, and living in that universe. And something that I have told some of you, because I know some of you that are in the room, but if you've ever played Freelancer, which is an old Chris Roberts game, there will be a standalone server for this, so that you can run a server in the background and let it run autonomously, so your friends can log in and play on that server. We're not going to be an MMO. We're never going there. Okay? But the idea, if you want to run a server and create your own universe and let people go in there, so the NPCs, the whole time that server's running, are going to be doing their own thing. It's not and if nobody's there, nothing's going to be happening. The universe will continue to do its own thing. And the last one I'm really excited about. With the linked missions and the campaigns, NPCs will remember their stance towards you, and they will take it with them. And they're going to be able to hold grudges. Or if you've done a good deed, they'll remember that. And if you encounter them 6 missions later, or in your open world universe that you're running your server on, they'll remember how you treated them, and they're going to keep that in mind with how you interact with them, both in specific missions or just in the open world as you're playing around. And we've done some testing with this. That one's got me really excited. It seems like a simple thing, but from an immersive world where you don't expect certain things to happen, that last one, from a game designer standpoint, is really difficult because now you've got something that changes based on the player's reactions that could affect how missions or other things are built, right? So you create an ebb and flow of issues there, but we're really excited about those. That's kind of the end of my myriad of slides and my, my long-winded discussions. At this point, let's see. We're doing great on time. Oh, yeah, you have to go back, though. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk in reverse while he's doing that, by the way.
I'd love to hear that.
That should just hit this. I think the space bar will do it. Oh. Maybe. There we go. This is the Deluxe Bridge we ran at too many games in Pennsylvania. This is 3 panoramic main view screens, 20 touchscreen displays, all wrapped around 6 players. All live interacting with the same game client that you can play today. A little dark in here, I realize that. Again, that's 20 feet wide, that main view screen. And all of those are touchscreens. So each station had 2 to 3 touchscreens that they interacted with. And the way this is architected, that's the same software you can play here at MAGFest. It's just how you scale your hardware. Okay. And it looks amazing on the video. I'm not going to lie. It looks even better in person. We had it here. Who actually got to play the Deluxe Bridge last year here at MAGFest? I know a couple did. We don't have it this year. We're bringing it back next year, though. I can promise you that, because a lot of people loved it. And I'm going to give a shout out. He was going to be here with us, but the weather kept him to coming in until tomorrow. Joel Everett, if you've played our game and heard our music, he's an Emmy-winning composer that did all of our music composition, and he's amazing. We're blessed to have him with us, including what you're hearing here. And I didn't really talk about this in the demo, but we have full hardware support for DMX, Arduino, and native support with hardware connections for Pis and Arduinos. So, like right there, you see the green. That's actually DMX. That's being controlled in real time by the engine. So you actually can have flashing lighting effects and like green, yellow, red alert and things like that. We are going into FTL. And I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. If you go and play, and if you haven't done this, if you touch the title of the screen at the top when you sit down, it'll actually give you the console selection screen, and you can see all the consoles that we have here. Every one of those is a different display, different actual screen. There's nothing repeated in any of those. So there's crew rosters, vessel status, a detailed scan display for sciences, a detailed target display for tactical. So there's all these other displays that are able, and again, this is all just HTML5. So we're going to keep adding screens as we go, including other stations like medical. That's when I've talked to a few people about medical. It'll be a little bit later in the year. But it's meant as a casual play station. So if you have that captain that flies through a nebula and doesn't remember to raise the shields and everybody gets radiation poisoning on the ship, well, the medical officer has something to do now instead of hanging out on the bridge. All right, thank you, sir.
All right.
But, all right, questions? Anything anybody want to talk about? Yeah.
NPC schedules,
Mm-hmm.
like them doing things on their own, is that kind of like a generated history, like Dwarf Fortress style, or is it like just kind of NPCs that you as players would interact with?
It's what it's going to be. Actually, I can kind of comment on this a little more specifically. There is a baseline schedule that they have an expectation. So it's not they need to go to location A, then location B, then location C, and repeat. Nothing quite so simplistic. What they'll have essentially is tasks. So they need, if I'm a merchant NPC and I know I've got goods on the ship, he's going to determine, okay, where's the best place to sell the goods I have? Okay, I need to go there. And so it's going to be decision-based. When I say schedules, that's kind of, I admit I'm kind of showing my age. That's an old programming term for NPC behavior. But it's really going to be based, the NPC is going to be making their own decisions based on the tasks you've given them, not a literal, they do these 10 actions and then repeat them consistently. So, they have their own objectives, is the best way to put it. And those objectives can be modified by the player. If a player goes to a particular area and takes out a trading post that they usually went to, well, the NPC is actually going to be intelligent enough to know that the outpost is gone, and now, okay, what's my next best option? Or if there's an area where there's now and similar, and actually, I'm going to ask another question. Who's played Pirates? Like Sid Meier's Pirates? Nobody? A couple of hands. That has a simple little tactic that I've talked to Sid Meier about and I loved, was that you could go to a particular town and it would tell you the recent news of activity around you. And I mean, this is a game from the 80s, folks, so it's a simple tactic. But my point here is NPCs will be doing the same thing. So they'll actually, when they go to an outpost, if they hear, hey, wait, there's the other outpost you normally go to just got raided, you might not want to go there, they're going to make their own decision to avoid that. So we really want, again, that living, breathing universe needs to have that kind of level of detail. And if you run one of those servers we're talking about, you might come back and the NPC has run themselves flat broke because they can't figure out how to make money, but they'll go on to figure out something else to do. That's going to be, I keep talking about merchants, but that's going to be true for military fleets as well. And factions, I didn't talk about this in the presentation, factions as a whole will actually have their own tactics, which will then inform their fleets. You know, one of the most common enemies you see in some of the missions we have here at MAGFest and any convention you might have played at is the Dashi, right? So the Dashi have their own area of influence. And again, if you play at MAGFest this year, you'll see something different on the Stellar map. If you go and look, you'll see areas of influence, which we've added for the factions. So that will get informed as well. But
so you could potentially kind of visit one area and there'll be a small faction, and then you leave, maybe you come back a while later and they could have built up like a much stronger fleet.
Yep. They have their own resources and they make their own decisions based on that, absolutely. Now, that can also be the opposite, right? I will tell you that in some of my testing, and none of what I'm going to tell you, this is all testing I've been doing locally, so you can't go play this at MAGFest today, but I've actually had it where an Alliance fleet, NPCs, found out through that same kind of telegraph system, right, where they found out, okay, something else is going on over here, went and took out a Dashi fleet on their own with no player interaction, and actually altered the storyline on their own, which I thought was, it's a simple thing, but as a developer, you love that kind of stuff. But, yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about challenges with creating content.
Mm-hmm.
If you could say more about that, and what the challenges you run into, and how you hope things will go going forward.
Well, we have a pretty, gladly, I'll tell you, we have a pretty specific issue with creating content, and it's more just, we're a small team. And I'm the lead developer, and in complete transparency, I'm the primary developer. I have some people that help on the side a little bit. I have people that help me with models, and we have Joel that does our music. But when it comes to missions and things like that, essentially, Mythric Studios is essentially an indie development group. Now, he's being bashful, but Mario in the front, Fred and Bonnie up here, and then Jim and Tim. I am blessed to have an incredible support system that helps at conventions, and when you come play at MAGFest, all these people are coming out to help Mythric bring this game to you guys. And so, without them, I wouldn't be able to be here showing this to you guys. And so I'm kind of saying that to give them props because they deserve it, but really about content. That for us, uniquely, it's really about the time. Most of us work on this literally in our spare time. I am actually a professional developer that does healthcare software for states. I work with Medicaid agencies in various states like Texas, Louisiana, Illinois, things like that. So that's my primary job today. Mythric Studios and Horizons is what I do for fun, and we're transitioning to where hopefully that's full time. But for us now, in terms of challenges for content, in terms of when we do have the time, I think that's partially your question as well, right? More just the general is. I'm going to be honest. It goes back to with mission design, exactly what I talked about in the presentation with getting everyone involved, right? It's a social game, so you can kind of lean on that, but at the same time, you don't want somebody sitting there bored for 20 minutes because there's nothing for them to do. So the challenge for us in mission design and campaign design equally is making sure that the mission flows in a certain way so that everyone's going to have a lull in what they do. I'll tell you flat out as a designer, the only station that is pretty much always committed in a game like this is going to be your flight console. Right? Because they're literally driving the ship, okay? Outside of that, you could make an argument as a designer where every other station suffers from a little bit of lag in that design. So we have to very much balance how can we make sure everyone is engaged in our design while at the same time not sacrificing for the sake of that, right? There's a delicate balance. You can't just say, let's give everybody things to do over the course of 5 minutes, but sometimes it can easily come off as you're just doing it for that sake, and it doesn't really feel right for the story or the mission, right? So I always will side on the aspect of keeping the storyline consistent and the flow better, even if it sacrifices a little bit of that, because I think in the end, that experience and the completion. How many of you have high-fived each other after playing a mission with Horizons and winning? I know you have. Yeah. So, because at the end of the day, and tell me I'm wrong for those of you that have played, okay? Every one of you, again, Flight being the unique exception, you've had times when you've had downtime, right? Where you weren't necessarily doing something, but you still had a great time. Am I wrong? And what I'm saying by that is that's where that balance comes in. Making sure that when they're done, everybody's high-fiving and having a good time. And hopefully that answered your question. Okay.
I guess the second part of the question
Sure.
is, how do you see things changing going forward, and what are you hoping for?
Oh, actually, there's some things I can't talk about, but actually the team will be growing over the next 6 months, where it won't be such a small team. It'll actually be larger in size for content. And what I'm hoping is when we do a panel next year for MAGFest, the game you see has progressed. I'm going to be very transparent. It's progressed slowly over the last 4 years, only because it's an indie game that we're doing as a labor of love, right? But each year we always bring something new to the table. We are still working on it. We're constantly doing that, and we have no intention of stopping. But there's some other things that, like I said, I can't really talk about. But as a result, will give us some resources to do exactly what I want to do, because I would love nothing more than have a team of 5 people to just knock this out of the park. Because what I'm showing you here and what we kind of talked about, what's in the future, that's just our immediate future. There's things that some of you that have talked to me in the room over the last couple of MAGFests know kind of some of the other things we're working on and want to do, but we're not naive enough to say we're going to be doing them with the team we have today. And again, it's about priorities, right? As a developer, especially if it's kind of your pet project, you have to pick and choose what you work on first. I'll tell you one that is, and I want to be very clear, this is not something that will magically pop up in 6 months, but something we had as an outset design for what we do here for Horizons, especially if you have bridge versus bridge and you're both in different places, is audio and video comms built into the experience. Not where you're using TeamSpeak or some other third-party app, but where the game itself is native, where you can actually hail the other captain and bring them up on screen and do the full experience that way. That is something we will absolutely have in the game when we can get it in there. But I don't want to be misrepresentative and say that's going to be appearing shortly. But it's going to happen. It's like, again, going back to that Star Trek experience, I'm building something I want to play, right? And I want all of that. I'm greedy. Including things like, and the game already supports Bluetooth comms. The reason you haven't seen it at conventions or available at use at home, so you actually could have a Bluetooth audio headpiece connected to the game, and the game can actually detect that second audio channel, and your comms officer can hear comms through that, completely separate from the game audio you hear on the main view screen or the main computer. That has never been turned on because we actually have to have the content for all that audio. So I don't want, so those are the kinds of things in terms of those challenges where once we have that content, you're just going to see some amazing stuff happen with what we're working on. So I saw somebody else with a hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of piggybacking on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned adding the mission editor UI
Mm-hmm.
for the homebrew community.
Yeah.
Is there like any way to kind of crowdsource or like take content from homebrew communities to help, I guess, like flesh out some of the game, like pick and choose stuff like that, or is the content that you're looking for isn't made by the
Proprietary, essentially, versus open source. Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and that's an awesome question. From the outset, something that we had really intended was the actual executable that runs the game, right, runs the server and the experience. That is proprietary to us. But because everything else we do is XML and HTML and JavaScript, it's all there. There's nothing to hide, right? And there's a mission that we're working on that actually was developed by a community member that we're going to potentially be adding to the game experience. And that's starting to happen. And the reason the mission builder UI is important to us is for every one person that can do it, that knows how to do that, right, as a developer, knows how to create those missions on their own, knows how to work with XML and HTML and build whatever they want, there's probably another 36 people that knows how to work with, they're perfectly intelligent enough to build a mission. They know in their mind, okay, I wanted to do this and then flow this way and this happens. They can handle all that, but they're not a programmer natively, right? If we can get that in there, the whole point of that is to let the community, give them the tools to really go crazy with that kind of creation. Today we have people sharing content on the forums. Something that we will have at some point, I'm not going to say when, is we're going to actually have it where, not like a Unity store, but we're going to have it where people actually can have, here's a mission, here's content, here's some weapons I built, here's an entire universe I built based off of the Wizard of Oz, where there's yellow stars and red stars and all that kind of stuff. And we actually have somebody doing that, by the way, and she's amazing, but she's building it for herself. So what a lot of the steps we're going to be taking outside of game development is community development. How can we help the community build some of those things? Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? All right. Go ahead. It's all right.
So talking a little bit about the flow chart.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed playing today that, and I think you had this earlier this year, different mentioned, that you have the ability for the communications operators to be demanding or feed or something.
Yeah.
So I love that those are added to the game now, because we were always saying that the communication, the dialogue trees, I guess,
Yeah.
would be the best way to describe it, were something we would love to see develop even more, getting the options to, like I know that surrendering is now an option for the players, very close to the end of their lives.
Yeah.
But, being able to maybe convince a captain that would have perhaps a stance normally not into you to join you on something after some sort of very complicated tree would be very rewarding. So it sounds like that might be a possibility.
Yeah, and actually, I'll give you a scenario relative to exactly what you're asking. So what she's really asking is, and tell me I'm right, is a potential where there's another captain of another faction that's theoretically an enemy, but maybe their disposition is enough where they're reasonable, and you say, hey, look, there's this situation going on that affects both of us. Will you help me? And try to convince an enemy captain to help you in game. And the answer is yes. Okay, and that's a Star Trek thing for me, right? No different than Picard convincing a Romulan captain to help him on a mission, right? Same kind of thing. We want all of that kind of stuff. And
I remember one of the earlier games, there was somewhere you could stop by, and there was two different ships, and you talked to one was Borg-esque, and one was Empire.
yeah.
And we were trying to, originally we looked at them and we're like, oh, well, there's two enemy ships, but we thought about it for a minute, and we're like, well, contextually, the Borg would theoretically not get along with the Empire.
Right.
What if we just didn't crew them so that they're aware of each other, and then they'll destroy each other? If you make them aware of each other. And that was very cool, but having to be the option to be diplomatic is also very, very interesting.
Right, and you're right. We've started a lot of that with comms with what we've added. And if those of you who haven't played with comms, you actually can set your demeanor. So you can say, plead with them, reason with them, or demand. You can say, we demand that you surrender, those kinds of things. So all that's now in the game, but with what I was talking about with the NPC behavior, it's even going to just take all of that to the next level, because all of that's already there in the comms behavior, but the NPCs will react differently to it because of what we talked about. So as a result, if they're a reasonable captain, even if they're an enemy, they may say, okay, I'm not going to fire on you today. I'm good with that. But then if you're dumb enough to fire on them, they're not going to be stupid about it. They're coming after you, and they may bring reinforcements. But those are the nuances that I really want to see, because, again, it's a social game, right? And we talked about that before. And as much as the NPCs can have that nuance of where they make their own decisions, it's not just cut and dry NPCs that, oh, I'm the bad guy and I'm going to kill you, right? If you can have NPCs that are enemies but can be reasoned with, or can be convinced to do something that is in your favor and not theirs, there's a lot of avenue for some great gameplay and just flat out fun for the players. So it's a great question. Oh, yeah.
I've never played the game, but I'm a big fan. I see it every year at MAGFest. You play on the projector.
Okay, it's here till Sunday at 2 p.m. You have no excuse now.
But my question is kind of as a developer.
Yeah.
It's really hard when you're
job and then get home and you're just not motivated to touch any more code.
It happens to all of us.
Right. So, I mean, the question is more for like everyone on the team. How do you keep motivated on the project? How do you keep things moving? Given that you have a
It takes all of us.
I can answer that.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, and actually, I'm going to answer the question, then I'm going to embarrass Tim.
That's a good question. So you have to ask yourself, what do you love to do? What do you want to be doing in 10 years? What do you want to be doing in 5 years? If you're going to restore a vehicle, you're going to rebuild a trailer, you're going to paint your house, you want to build a family, you want to write a book. If you want to do it, you'll find the time. Because you find the time for the other things, right? So if it's getting stale, what do you got to do? You got to break it up and do the things that are fun and things that are interesting to you there. Sanding the body of a Jeep is not fun, okay? It gets old. But eventually, you know you're going to have a nice shiny Jeep when you get done. That's personal experience there. But if that gets old, you can set that aside. It's not going anywhere. You can work on the brakes. You can work on something else. Same thing with this here. There's more aspects to this than you might realize. That picture that he showed that had all those screens and all of that tech, none of that was expensive. Believe it or not, because we're cheap. Okay? We buy computers that are refurbished.
I believe broken
Is another thing too, yeah. Broken. And so because we had a desire to have all of these, if you go into the Horizons room now, you're going to see a whole lot of computers there. And if we were paying many, many thousands of dollars for each one of those computers, we would not be here. It would not have happened. So the desire to hunt down the bargains and network with people. So it's a multifaceted thing. It's not just writing code. It's networking with people and finding like-minded people. And he's only one creative mind. He can't see every little thing. Neither are you. And so you, like any good author, you let people read your pages. You know, so whatever your gig is, and what is your passion? What are you trying to do?
I had a bunch of projects that I worked with on different teams, but you know, the founder to fall apart, so I just kind of wanted to see what his perspective was.
Well, to answer that in a slightly different direction as well, is we rely on each other a lot. So there are days where Dave wants to do no coding at all, but we'll sit and bounce around ideas, we'll talk about the game, and so feeding off of each other's drive for this, you know, just like everything else, you have highs and lows on a regular basis. Yeah. And the team aspect and just keeping the project alive and, you know, just keeping things going even when you may not be 100% on the project that specific day. You know, getting together with the rest of the group and brainstorming, working on projects, learning cabinetry for our initial console for flight and tactical. You know, that was a new experience for us. I mean, that was a serious cabinetry project, which Tim really headed up and the rest of us sanded. So he mentioned sanding Jeeps. I can tell you sanding a console is not fun either.
We wanted the first console to look a little bit like the Star Trek console. We wanted to have a physical angular console into which the touch screens were built. Right. And also to make it within the parameters, it'll fit through doors and it'll fit in a vehicle, and doesn't weigh a ton, and will travel to these conventions was a bit of a challenge, and it was all made with really, really cheap computers, and a lot of secondhand stuff, but it was made basically. And I said, listen, the original Star Trek set was made out of plywood, and that's what we're going to make this out of.
And we put our amateur minds together and talked about the ergonometry of working a console like that. I think we had 3 or 4 meetings just to discuss the proper angles, what gives the best...
Foam core mock-ups, the whole deal.
What gives the best ease of use. Oh, well, that angle doesn't quite work right with the angle of view with the monitor. Now you're going to catch glare, table height. You know, all these little simple things that why are we dealing with that? It's all devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And so just pulling that one specific portion of the project together, I mean, we devoted a lot of time, but there was so much learning. I mean, we're learning this from ground up in that respect for the player experience in a bridge setup, just outside of the coding alone.
Yeah, and Tim's analogy is almost spot on with, you know, Sandy Jeep, just go work on something else. From a coding perspective, it's exactly the same. And, you know, I'm no different in exactly that analogy. And I will tell you, for me, no matter what the project is, but particularly on a game, you know, with games in reality, you're not building you know, an accounting app. You're building something that has to have a lot of things working in it to get things right, and especially if you're dealing with something like this, there's a lot of components, not just with AI, but just the world building aspects and everything else, right? A lot of moving parts, and it can really kind of feel like the world's kind of crashing down on you, no pun intended, in terms of all these things you have to do. But to go from a coding perspective to what Tim said, if you're really stuck in a particular area and you're really trotting through it and you're really having a hard time with it and your inspiration's kind of waning, right? You absolutely do what he's talking about. Attack something else, because what's going to happen is two things. If you attack something else and complete it, what do all of us as developers do when you finish a particular section, right? It's kind of this, oh, thank God. You know, you've got that next checkbox done, right? Every little accomplishment, every time that something works for the first time, it's a big deal. And it does help us kind of keep the inspiration and that fire going as you complete things. And what it will also do for you is not just check that box off, but I'm going to tell you from experience, it does lift you up in a way where you will come fresh back to that other thing, and you're either going to look at it from a fresh perspective, or you're going to come back and go, oh, no wonder, that's what I was doing wrong the whole frickin' time. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've literally set something aside that was frustrating me and causing me to kind of lose that passion, gone and done something else, come back, and lo and behold, in no time at all, not only have I figured out my problem, but I've also added something to the equation, not just fixed the problem, but I've said, you know what, I wasn't even doing this the right way. If I do this, then I can add that, and then, oh my God, I can do this, oh wow, and then you just keep going, right? And it just builds on itself. So, but that's an awesome question. Anyone else? Sure.
So with the free flight, are you able to like run into people and kind of start, not necessarily missions, but like will there be like NPCs that you could talk to, or like enemies that you would run into?
Yeah, and then she's referring to, there's a mission called Free Flight, and that's absolutely its intention. I'm going to be blunt today. It doesn't do a lot of what you're talking about. That's what some of the things I talked about that we're adding. Once those things start to fall into place, yeah, the Free Flight mission, there are no objectives. You're in the universe, right? You can do whatever you want. As we start adding some of those bullet list items we talked about in the show, which is why I wanted to talk about them tonight, then everything will fall into place there where the universe is doing its own thing. And if you want to just fly around, you know, go visit the rings of Saturn. I didn't have the rings for Saturn for the longest time, and it drove him nuts.
Years.
It was a while. And so I added them, and he's happy. But if you just want to go touring, right, and do no combat, you just want to fly around, and I think in Tim's case, you know, have a nice beer and just kind of enjoy the universe. You know, he likes that.
I don't feel you should judge me this way.
I didn't say it was a bad
If you
beer.
go to the astrogation map, you can actually fly to the maps, the planets in our solar system. If you go to another solar system and you change to that map, you can fly to those planets. And there are gorgeous graphics in the game that are the best NASA has for,
Yeah.
especially Jupiter. Jupiter's gorgeous. So my argument has always been, why isn't there a space station out in the Kuiper Belt that is the last space station you would go to, leaving our solar system, and then would go to Alpha Centauri? That's our nearest neighbor. Dave, where's the space station at Alpha Centauri? I don't need a mission to go there. It's the next place to go. It's only 4 light years away. Come on, man.
And they've got an awesome spa. You know, that's
That's what I'm saying.
So, but yeah, what I'm really getting, and actually I'll kind of elaborate on this though, is that where we are in the project is we've got an engine that, you know, we're feeling really good about. We've gotten it to a great point where we can now do a lot with it. Now it's content time, and we've been in that phase for a little bit. We've got a new person working on models. We're working on some missions that we're hoping we're going to go live here at MAGFest tomorrow, one in particular,
Yep.
where we're adding a lot of those kinds of things. So that's why I'm really excited, and what we wanted to talk about, some of the things we're adding, is we're now in that where we're adding all this stuff to this great world where it's going to give you those kinds of experiences. Because then I'm going to get phone calls from him going, when did the Kuiper Belt? There was a space station. Yay! Yeah. Right? I'm going to get that call. Yeah, see, I know the truth. But you know what? All joking aside, to what Tim's talking about is I'm guilty of that in some of the old space games I've played. Back in the Elite, I didn't really put Elite in there because Elite frustrated me more than anything else, actually. But with Elite, I did exactly that. I wanted to see what the rest of the universe looked like. I didn't care about playing and doing that. I just wanted to go fly around and just check things out, right? Mm-hmm. But if we do our job right and add some of the things we're talking about and get all that done, those experiences by themselves, you'll spend hours doing that. And I'd be just as guilty.
Actually, it hasn't really been mentioned, but one of the overall concepts for the game, Dave, if you want to share more about this, you know, when you come to the con experience, you're completing missions over the last year and a half. We've added additional tasks, but it's conflict with other vessels and docking with stations now and things of that nature. But the idea with the game release that we've always had is the concept is these missions that we're building, that's going to take you through the tutorial, that's your campaign. But at the end of that campaign, you have the entire universe to explore, that free flight. And so maybe that's a good jumping point for you to talk more about.
Yeah, and it ties exactly into what we've been talking about, the living, breathing universe. And something else I didn't mention, you know, and this is no different from pretty much any other space game out there. The universe is a mixture of our generated content, you know, planets we've added, and we're adding more and more in star systems that are the real deal, like where we actually know specific Kepler systems and things like that. We're adding all of those that we can as we go. And then there's that aspect of, you know, further out, it's generated, right? It's content generated. There's a lot of space games that do this. But the reason I'm saying that is if we go through that and you've gone through all your missions and you've completed the campaign, you've affected that universe in a way that's unique to your gaming experience. So as that server runs, your universe is different from somebody else's universe that they've played through and generated and affected, right? So each of these standing universes can be played and visited by friends will be different. It's not just, oh, I've been to that planet, yeah, I've done that. So jumping on a friend's server and playing around, it's going to be a different experience, and by design.
But you'll also still have thousands of solar systems to just go explore.
Many thousands, yeah. And again,
what do you find out there? You know,
yeah.
What Easter eggs may be out there for you to explore that you come across? You know, it's not a conflict game by design. That's what we're showing for a con experience to give you a lot of fun for an hour session. But really, this is a lot more than that. It's an exploration game.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right. The home experience is much more of an exploration game. Yeah. And so we've got a minute or two left. Any other final questions?
So exploring, is there perhaps, you said that there's areas of influence that
Right. Faction-controlled areas, yeah.
So within those areas of influence, would there, say, be perhaps a massive moon planet in space or something like that you could, say, fly by and throw rocks at the window and run off to somewhere else in hopes of starting something?
You mean kind of poke the bear? Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm enjoying this universe so ceaselessly for a bit.
Okay.
I need to.
Well, I want to point something out, and this is something we added in the last year. So if you played it at the convention last year, NPCs even today will follow you. Like if you FTL out, they'll say, "Okay, they went this path. Let's go." Oh, you're playing. That's all right. So you can't just like go poke the bear and run away back to Earth and I've warped out. We're all good. I was just having fun. No, they'll just show up at Earth and be like, "Hey." Yeah. So, I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, no different from what you're seeing us talk about here. But if we get what we're talking about done, a lot of the things that you're talking about, because again, I want to play this too, you know, so does Tim. And he wants a space station.
Every Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. time for one last question, and then we got to wrap up for the next crew. Anybody? All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully this was great information for you guys, and I'll be around after if you have any other additional questions. Thank you, everyone.